A woman called us crying for help. This puppy's face is badly burned. Little pup was scared and ran around crying. It is said that he was burned by hot cooking oil. A cruel chef threw hot cooking oil on his face. He was crying, but no one cared. What happened next will make you cry. The city of Chicago was alive with its usual chaotic rhythm. Towering skyscrapers reached toward the heavens, their windows glittering like jewels under the sinking sun. Below, the streets teemed with life. Office workers bustled to catch their evening trains. Street vendors shouted over one another, advertising hot dogs and roasted nuts, and the occasional musician strummed a soulful tune, hoping to earn enough for the night. A tiny figure weaved unnoticed through the legs of rushing pedestrians. The little Labrador puppy, no more than 3 months old, moved hesitantly down the sidewalk, his once fluffy golden fur now matted and filthy. His eyes, wide and brown like polished amber, darted nervously at every sound. Every step was painful, his cracked, bleeding paw pads pressed against the cold, unforgiving pavement. He had been wandering the city for days, searching for food, for warmth, for kindness. But kindness, he was quickly learning, was a rare commodity in a city that thrived on its own relentless pace. The puppy paused at the corner of an intersection, sniffing the air. His empty stomach growled fiercely at the faint smell of food wafting from a nearby diner. He followed the scent instinctively, his tail wagging ever so slightly in cautious hope. The diner was a small establishment nestled between 2 towering office buildings. The aroma of fried chicken and sizzling burgers spilled out from the back door, where a gruff-looking chef stood, smoking a cigarette and barking orders at his staff inside. The puppy approached cautiously, his tiny body low to the ground. He stopped a few feet away from the chef, his tail wagging timidly. His eyes, large, innocent, and pleading, met the man's. "Get out of here," the chef muttered, shooing the dog away with a dismissive wave of his hand. The puppy tilted his head, confused but undeterred. He let out a soft whine, his hunger overcoming his fear. The chef's irritation grew. He stomped toward the puppy, his heavy boots echoing against the pavement. "I said, get out of here," he shouted, grabbing a broom from the corner. He swung it at the dog, the bristles brushing against the puppy's side. The little dog yelped and scampered back, his tail tucked between his legs. But he didn't run far. He sat just a few feet away, trembling, but still hoping. Hunger was a powerful motivator, and the puppy, despite his fear, couldn't bring himself to leave the scent of food behind. The chef, now fuming, turned back toward the kitchen, his face twisted in anger as he grabbed a frying pan filled with hot oil. "Let's see if you come back after this," he growled, stepping outside. Without hesitation, he hurled the pan's contents toward the puppy. The oil hit the puppy's face, splashing across his soft fur and delicate skin. A scream tore from his tiny throat, high-pitched and heart-wrenching, echoing down the alley. The pain was immediate and excruciating, blinding him as he stumbled backward. The world became a blur of agony. He couldn't see, couldn't think, only feel the searing heat that burned his skin and matted his fur. Instinct took over. The puppy turned and ran, his tiny legs carrying him as far as they could. He didn't know where he was going, only that he had to get away. The bright lights of the city faded behind him as he darted into a maze of alleys, his cries growing weaker with every step. Finally, his legs gave out. He collapsed near a dumpster, his body trembling violently. His breaths came in shallow gasps, and his vision faded in and out. The rain began to fall, washing over him like icy needles. It mingled with the blood and oil on his fur, dripping onto the cold concrete beneath him. The puppy lay there, too weak to move, as the world around him grew darker and quieter. For the first time in his short life, he felt utterly alone. The streets of Chicago carried on as they always did, oblivious to the small life that clung to the edge of existence in a forgotten alley. Cars rushed past, their headlights cutting through the rain. People hurried along the sidewalks, umbrellas raised and heads down, too busy to notice the tiny figure lying motionless in the shadows. But fate, it seemed, wasn't ready to give up on the little Labrador just yet. Clara Peterson had just finished her shift at St. Joseph's Hospital. The day had been long and emotionally draining, a blur of emergencies, paperwork, and quiet moments with patients who had no one else to talk to. All she wanted now was to get home, change into her pajamas, and curl up with a cup of tea. The rain had soaked through her thin jacket by the time she reached her street. She adjusted her umbrella, shivering as a gust of wind blew through her. As she passed an alley near her apartment, a faint sound reached her ears. It was soft, almost drowned out by the rain, a weak, pitiful whimper. Clara paused, her heart quickening. She turned toward the sound, peering into the dark alley. At first she saw nothing but piles of trash and the dull glint of water pooling on the ground. But then her eyes landed on a small, motionless shape near the dumpster. She hesitated. It could be anything. A piece of trash. A rat. But something about the shape tugged at her instincts. She stepped closer, her boots splashing through puddles. What she saw made her gasp. Lying in the rain was a puppy, his tiny body curled into a ball. His face was horribly burned, the skin raw and blistered. His fur, matted with dirt and blood, clung to his shivering frame. "Oh my God," Clara whispered, dropping to her knees. The puppy opened his eyes, weakly, his gaze meeting hers. For a moment he tried to move, but his body betrayed him, collapsing back into the puddle. Clara's heart broke at the sight. She carefully removed her scarf and wrapped it round the puppy, shielding him from the rain. His body was feverishly warm and his breathing was shallow. "You poor baby," she murmured, stroking his matted fur. "What happened to you?" The puppy flinched at her touch but didn't have the strength to resist. Clara pulled out her phone, her hands trembling as she dialed the number for the local animal rescue team. "Hi, I found a puppy," she said, her voice shaking. "He's been burned. Badly. He needs help right away." The rescue team arrived within minutes, their van pulling up with flashing lights. 2 volunteers jumped out carrying a stretcher and medical supplies. Clara helped them lift the puppy onto the stretcher, her heart aching at the way he whimpered softly with every movement. "Will he make it?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. One of the volunteers, a young woman with kind eyes, placed a reassuring hand on Clara's shoulder. "We'll do everything we can," she said. Clara climbed into the van with them, refusing to leave the puppy's side. As they sped toward the animal hospital, she held his tiny paw and whispered, "You're going to be okay. I promise." The animal rescue van sped through the rain-soaked streets of Chicago, its flashing lights reflecting off the wet pavement. Inside, the little Labrador lay motionless on the stretcher, his small body barely rising and falling with each shallow breath. Clara sat beside him, a hand gently resting on his paw. The volunteers worked quickly, checking his vitals and wrapping a temporary bandage around his burned face to protect it from further exposure. "He's so small," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "How could anyone do this to him?" "People can be cruel," replied one of the volunteers, a man named Kevin who had been with the rescue team for over a decade. "But sometimes they surprise you with kindness too. You've found him. That's his first bit of luck in a long time." Clara nodded, tears slipping down her cheeks. She tightened her grip on the puppy's paw, as if willing him to hold on. The van screeched to a halt outside the Chicago Animal Care Center, a bustling hospital that never slept. As the doors swung open, a team of veterinary staff was already waiting with a gurney. Dr. Maya Patel, the hospital's senior veterinarian, took charge immediately. Her sharp eyes assessed the puppy's injuries as she gently lifted him onto the gurney. "Severe burns to the face and neck," she murmured to her team. "He's dehydrated, malnourished, and possibly in shock. Let's get him stabilized." Clara followed the team inside, her heart pounding. The hospital was a whirlwind of activity, animals barking, meowing, and chirping from every direction. But all Clara could focus on was the tiny, broken puppy being wheeled away. "Will he survive?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Meyer turned to her, her expression both serious and compassionate. It's too early to say. He's in critical condition, but he's young. Puppies are resilient, and he's made it this far. That says something. Clara nodded, clutching her scarf, the same one she had wrapped around the puppy in the rain. She decided then and there that she wasn't going to leave until she knew he was safe. The hours dragged on as the veterinary team worked tirelessly. The puppy was sedated to ease his pain while they cleaned his burns and began the delicate process of treating his wounds. His fur was shaved around the affected areas, revealing red, blistered skin beneath. Dr. Meyer frowned as she examined his face. "The burns are deep," she said, speaking to her assistant. "There's a risk of infection, and his vision might be compromised. We'll need to monitor him closely." Meanwhile, Clara sat in the waiting room, her hands wrapped around a cup of lukewarm coffee that she hadn't touched. Her thoughts were consumed by the little dog. She didn't know why she felt so connected to him, but something about his resilience, his silent plea for help, had touched a part of her she hadn't realized was vulnerable. She thought about her own life, how she had moved to Chicago after a painful breakup, hoping to start fresh. She had thrown herself into her work as a nurse, but the loneliness had crept in, gnawing at the edges of her heart. Maybe, just maybe, this little dog needed her as much as she needed him. It was nearly dawn when Dr. Meyer emerged from the treatment room, her scrub stained and her face etched with exhaustion. Clara jumped to her feet. "How is he?" she asked anxiously. "He's stable for now," Dr. Meyer said, offering a small smile. "He's a fighter. I'll give him that. But the next 48 hours are critical. He's still at risk for infection, and his burns will require long-term care." "Can I see him?" Clara asked. Dr. Meyer hesitated for a moment before nodding. "He's sedated, but you can sit with him." Clara followed her into the treatment room, her heart pounding. The sight of the puppy made her chest tighten. He lay on a soft blanket, a tiny body covered in bandages. An IV line delivered fluids to keep him hydrated, and a small oxygen mask helped him breathe. Clara knelt beside him, her fingers gently brushing against the uninjured fur on his back. "Hey there, little one," she heard. "You're safe now. No one's going to hurt you ever again." Puppy didn't stir, but his chest rose and fell steadily, a small but powerful sign of life. Over the next several days, the puppy's condition remained fragile. The veterinary team worked around the clock, treating his burns, managing his pain, and monitoring for signs of infection. Clara visited every day, spending hours by his side. She brought him soft blankets, whispered words of encouragement, and even hummed lullabies she remembered from her childhood. The staff began calling the puppy Max, after a suggestion from Clara. "He needs a strong name," she said with a smile. "Something that shows he's a survivor." Slowly but surely, Max began to show signs of improvement. His appetite returned, and he managed to wag his tail weakly when Clara entered the room. "He's got spirit," Dr. Meyer said one afternoon, watching as Max licked Clara's hand. "I think he knows he has something to live for." As the weeks turned into months, Max's transformation was nothing short of miraculous. His burns healed, leaving behind scars that told the story of his resilience. His fur grew back in patches, soft and golden once more. But what truly amazed everyone was his spirit. Despite everything he had endured, Max was gentle, playful, and fiercely loyal to Clara. Clara, in turn, felt her own life change. She had started volunteering at the animal hospital, inspired by Max's journey. She spent her days caring for other animals in need and her evenings with Max, who now lived with her in her small apartment. One rainy evening, as Clara sat on the couch with Max curled up beside her, she stroked his head and whispered, "You saved me too, you know." Max looked up at her with those same wide amber eyes, and for the first time Clara felt like she had found her purpose. The snow had begun to fall lightly over Chicago, blanketing the bustling city in a layer of frosty white. Christmas lights flickered from storefronts and apartment windows, casting a warm glow against the cold winter sky. But amid the holiday cheer, one story had captured the hearts of the city. A story of survival, resilience, and unexpected kindness. Max, the little Labrador who had suffered so much, had become a symbol of hope. It all started with Clara. A few weeks after Max had fully recovered and settled into her home, she decided to share his story on social media. She had no intention of making it a spectacle. She simply wanted to raise awareness about animal cruelty and the importance of rescue organizations like the one that had saved Max. She posted a photo of Max sitting proudly on her living room rug, his golden fur gleaming in the soft light. His scars were still visible, but they only seemed to add to his charm. Alongside the photo, Clara wrote a heartfelt message. "This is Max. A few months ago, he was a stray, severely burned and left to die. But thanks to the amazing team at Chicago Animal Care Center and the kindness of strangers, he's now thriving. Max reminds me every day that love and resilience can overcome even the darkest moments. Please, if you see an animal in need, don't look away. Be their voice." The post went viral within hours. Thousands of people shared Max's story, moved by the little dog's incredible journey. Messages of support poured in from all over the city, and soon from all over the country. The response was overwhelming. Donations flooded into the Chicago Animal Care Center, allowing them to expand their facilities and rescue even more animals. Volunteers signed up in record numbers, inspired by Max's story to make a difference. One cold morning, Clara received a call from a local news station. The producer had seen her post and wanted to feature Max in a segment about animal rescue. Clara hesitated at first. Max had already been through so much, and she didn't want to overwhelm him. But she also knew that sharing his story could inspire others to help animals in need. The interview took place in Clara's cozy apartment. Max sat beside her on the couch, wagging his tail and occasionally nuzzling her hand. The reporter, a kind-hearted woman named Maria, asked Clara about the night she found Max, his recovery, and the bond they had formed. "Max taught me something important," Clara said, stroking his head gently. "Even when life is cruel, there's always hope. He never gave up, and that's why he's here today." The segment aired later that week, and Max's fame only grew. He became a local celebrity, affectionately known as Chicago's Miracle Dog. People began stopping Clara on the street to ask about him, and children would run up to pet him, their faces lighting up when he wagged his tail. Max's story didn't just inspire individuals, it sparked change. Local lawmakers, moved by the outpouring of support, proposed stricter penalties for animal cruelty cases. Shelters and rescue organizations reported an increase in adoptions as families opened their homes to animals who had once been forgotten. Clara often thought about how one act of kindness had created a ripple effect. She had found Max at his lowest point, but it was the collective compassion of so many people that had given him a second chance. One evening, Clara received a lettre in the mail. It was from the Chicago Humane Society, inviting her and Max to a special gala honoring the city's animal rescue heroes. Clara laughed as she read the letter aloud to Max. "Looks like you're going to be the guest of honor," she said, scratching behind his ears. Max barked happily as if he understood. The gala was held in a grand ballroom, with chandeliers that sparkled like stars and tables adorned with elegant floral arrangements. Clara wore a simple but beautiful navy dress, while Max sported a red bow tie that matched the festive decorations. As Clara entered the room with Max by her side, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the little Labrador who had captured their hearts. The silence quickly gave way to applause, and Max wagged his tail enthusiastically, as if he knew the ovation was for him. During the event, Clara was invited to the stage to share Max's story. Her voice trembled with emotion as she recounted the night she found him, the dedicated work of the rescue team, and the long journey of healing that had brought them to this moment. "I'm just one person," she said, her voice steady despite the lump in her throat. "But together, we've shown what's possible when we choose compassion. Max isn't just a survivor. He's a reminder that even the smallest act of kindness can change a life." The audience rose to their feet, applauding Clara and Max with tears in their eyes. As the gala came to an end, Clara sat on the edge of the stage with Max beside her. She looked down at him, her heart swelling with gratitude. "We've come a long way, haven't we, buddy?" she whispered. Max wagged his tail and rested his head on her lap, his amber eyes shining with trust and love. The journey wasn't over, it was only beginning. Together they would continue to spread a message of hope and kindness, proving that even in a city as vast and chaotic as Chicago, the smallest acts of compassion could create the biggest changes. As winter began to fade into spring, the city of Chicago bloomed with new life. The snow melted, revealing patches of green grass on the sidewalks and colorful flowers in the parks. But for Clara and Max, this was more than just a change in the weather. It was the beginning of a new chapter in their lives. The little Labrador's fame had become a platform for something much bigger than either of them could have imagined. After the gala, Clara had been approached by several schools and community centers. They wanted Max to visit, to show children the importance of kindness and empathy toward animals. Clara was hesitant at first. She wasn't sure how Max would handle large groups of excited children, but she soon realized that this was a chance to do more than just raise awareness about animal rescue. It was an opportunity to teach the next generation how to love and care for those who couldn't speak for themselves. The first school Clara and Max visited was Oakwood Elementary, a small public school on the edge of the city. The children were buzzing with excitement when they heard that a miracle dog would be coming to speak to them. Max, always the little charmer, was ready for the challenge. He trotted confidently into the gymnasium, his red bow tie still neatly in place. Clara followed closely behind, her heart racing with nerves. The gymnasium was filled with rows of children, their eyes wide with anticipation. Some of them had seen Max's story on the news, and others had heard about him from their parents. Now here he was in person, standing proudly next to Clara. "Hello, Oakwood Elementary," Clara said, stepping up to the microphone. "This is Max, and today we're going to talk about kindness. Kindness to animals, to each other, and to ourselves." The children cheered, and Clara smiled. She was always amazed at how receptive kids could be. She had no idea how this would unfold, but she knew it was going to be special. "Max has been through a lot," Clara continued. "When I first found him, he was hurt and alone. But now he's strong, happy, and full of love. That's because of the people who helped him, and the love that he's given to others in return." Max wagged his tail, his amber eyes bright with affection for the crowd. He seemed to understand that his role wasn't just to be an adorable puppy. He was there to teach them something important. As Clara spoke, the children listened intently. Some of them raised their hands, eager to ask questions. "Did Max have to go to the doctor?" one child asked. Clara nodded. "Yes, he had to see a lot of doctors. They helped him get better, just like how we help our friends when they're sick or hurt." "Why did someone hurt him?" another child asked, her voice full of concern. Clara paused for a moment, her heart aching at the question. "Not all people are kind," she said softly. "But that doesn't mean we stop being kind. Max's story is a reminder that we should always stand up for those who need help, no matter how big or small." The children were silent for a moment, processing her words. Then, as if on cue, several of them stood up and walked over to Max, who was sitting calmly by Clara's side. They gently petted him, speaking to him in soft, reassuring voices. "You're so brave," one girl whispered. "You're the best dog ever," said a boy with a wide smile. It was in this moment that Clara realized just how powerful Max's story had become. Not only had he healed from his physical injuries, but he was now healing the hearts of children, teaching them that love and empathy could make the world a better place. The visit to Oakwood Elementary was just the beginning. Over the next few months, Clara and Max traveled to schools, community centers, and even libraries across Chicago. Everywhere they went, they encountered children eager to learn about compassion and kindness. In each place they visited, Clara shared Max's story. She told the children about how he had been abandoned and hurt, but how he had overcome his pain with the help of kind-hearted people. She explained that they too could make a difference in the world by helping animals, standing up for what was right, and spreading kindness wherever they went. Max, for his part, was a natural at making friends. He loved the attention, the soft pats, and the endless supply of treats from the children. But more importantly, he seemed to understand the importance of his role. Every time he gently nuzzled a child's hand or wagged his tail in response to a kind word, he was teaching them something. He was teaching them that love could heal even the deepest wounds. One evening after a long day of school visits, Clara sat on the couch with Max curled up beside her. The apartment was quiet, save for the soft hum of the city outside. Clara gazed out the window, reflecting on everything they had accomplished together. "I think we've done something amazing, Max," Clara said softly, scratching behind his ears. "We've shown people that even when life is hard, there's always hope. And we've made so many new friends who care about animals, just like we do." Max looked up at her, his eyes full of trust and love. He nuzzled her hand, as if to say, "We did it together." Clara smiled. She knew that their mission wasn't over yet. Max had become more than just a survivor. He was a beacon of hope for the entire city. And together, they would continue to spread their message of kindness, one school, one community at a time. Max's fame didn't just end with the school visits. The media continued to cover his story, and more organizations reached out to Clara, eager to collaborate. The little dog's story was now part of something much bigger, something that was transforming the way people viewed animals and the way they treated each other. But Clara knew that it wasn't just about the recognition. It was about the change they were creating, the lives they were touching, and the hearts they were opening. Max had shown Chicago and the world that love could heal anything. The air was crisp as spring finally arrived in Chicago, bringing with it the promise of new beginnings. The city, once blanketed by snow, now bloomed with life. The streets were filled with the sounds of children playing, street vendors calling out their wares, and the distant hum of busy commuters. But for Clara and Max, the change of seasons symbolized more than just warmer weather. It marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. Max had already made a tremendous impact on the city. His story of survival, recovery, and love had resonated deeply with people. But now, as Clara and Max sat in their favorite park on a sunny afternoon, they knew their journey was far from over. There was still work to do. There were still lives to change. It was a cold morning when Clara received the call that would change everything. The voice on the other end was familiar. It was from Emily, the director of the Chicago Animal Care Center, the organization that had helped save Max all those months ago. "Clara, we've been thinking about something," and began. "We've seen how much impact Max has had on the city. People are listening and they want to help, but we need a bigger platform, a stronger voice. We want to start a campaign to change animal welfare laws, to ensure that animals like Max are never subjected to cruelty again." Clara's heart skipped a beat. The thought of pushing for real change, not just in Chicago, but on a state level, was overwhelming. But she also knew it was the right thing to do. "I'm in," Clara said without hesitation. "Let's do it." And so the campaign was born. The campaign was called Pause for a Change, a movement to strengthen animal cruelty laws in Illinois. Clara and Max became the faces of the initiative, sharing their story at rallies, speaking to lawmakers, and appearing in news interviews. They worked alongside organizations like the Humane Society and local shelters, all united in their mission to protect animals and ensure that those who harmed them were held accountable. Max, ever the charming ambassador, was a star. Everywhere they went, people wanted to meet the brave little dog who had captured their hearts. His golden fur, the faint scars on his face, and his unwavering optimism made him the perfect symbol for the cause. But beyond Max's cuteness, there was a deeper message. Clara spoke passionately at every rally, telling the crowd how Max's story wasn't just his own. It was the story of countless animals suffering in silence. She explained how important it was for everyone to stand up for animals, to be their voice when they couldn't speak for themselves. "It's not enough to just feel sorry for animals who suffer," Clara would say. "We must act. We must create a world where cruelty is no longer tolerated, where every animal is treated with dignity and care." Months passed and the campaign gained momentum. There were protests, petitions, and letters sent to lawmakers demanding stronger animal protection laws. It wasn't easy. The road was long and the opposition from certain industries was fierce. But Clara and Max remained determined, their bond growing stronger as they worked side by side toward their goal. Then one chilly morning in late fall they received the news they had been waiting for. The Illinois Senate had voted in favor of the new animal welfare law. The bill would increase penalties for animal cruelty, provide more resources for shelters, and ensure that animal abusers would face harsher consequences for their actions. The news spread like wildfire. Clara and Max were invited to the state capitol for the signing of the bill. As they stood in front of the cameras, Clara held Max in her arms, tears welling in her eyes. The journey had been difficult, but it had been worth it. They had done it. They had changed the laws for the betterment of countless animals, ensuring that Max's story would never be forgotten. The law was signed into effect, and Pause for a Change became a national movement. Other states followed suit, inspired by what had been achieved in Illinois. Clara and Max continued to advocate for animal welfare, working with lawmakers, shelters, and volunteers to create a better world for animals in need. But even as they celebrated their success, Clara knew that their work wasn't done. The world needed more advocates, more voices for the voiceless. And so Clara and Max traveled to other cities, speaking at schools, holding rallies, and spreading their message of compassion and hope. Max, though now older and showing the signs of age, remained as charming as ever. He had become a beloved figure, not just in Chicago, but around the country. His legacy was one of resilience, compassion, and the unwavering belief that one voice, one story, could change the world. On a quiet evening, Clara sat on the porch of their small home, gazing out at the stars. Max was curled up beside her, his head resting on her lap. The wind rustled through the trees and the soft hum of the world continued around them. But in this peaceful moment, Clara felt a deep sense of contentment. They had made a difference. "Do you remember when we first met?" Clara whispered, stroking Max's head. "When I found you on that cold night? You were so hurt, so scared. But you never gave up. And now look at us." Max looked up at her, his amber eyes filled with trust and love. His tail thumped softly against the porch. Clara smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. "We've come so far, haven't we, buddy? You've changed so many lives, and so have I. You showed me that kindness is never wasted. You gave me hope when I had none." Max nuzzled her hand in response, as if to say, "We did it together." As the night stretched on and the stars twinkled above, Clara knew that their journey had come full circle. Max's story would live on, not just as a tale of survival, but as a beacon of hope for future generations. Together they had created a world where love, compassion, and kindness triumphed over cruelty. And for Clara, that was the greatest gift of all. I hope you enjoyed this story. If you like this story, write something about Max in comment section, and also subscribe your channel Storyboat for daily upcoming heartwarming stories.